Welcome to The Dash. Hi, this is Yvonne with The Dash, bringing you today another story that is here just to bring God all the glory. And today I get the honor of having my precious sister, Shirley Dendrinos.
Dendrinos, a Greek last name.
That's well, she is joining me today to share her story. I got the honor of meeting Shirley. It has been almost a year. Yeah, it's been like 9 months.
Yes.
And when I met Shirley, it was just like we were just laughing about it. It's just an interesting initial transaction,
Yes.
and it was immediate that we knew we were being connected by God.
Oh yeah, forever friendship, sisterhood. I mean, it was amazing. It was a God divine connection, but it was first impression. Talking about first impressions, but it was amazing. It was exactly what I needed personally, but it was a God thing.
Amen. Amen. And we might get into that, but I want to make sure that we share your story. And one of the things that always impresses me is when I have a strong sister in the Lord, finding out where did that start from. I mean, was it something like with me that it started when I was 21, or did you know the Lord as a child? Did you have a relationship with Him as a child?
Well, it's funny that you say that because earlier I was saying that I did not have an encounter with God until later on after I married. But in reality, yes, I was born and raised in church. But
Yeah.
this is the saying that you go to church, but the church is not in you. I don't know if you have heard
Oh
that
yeah.
that saying.
Oh yeah.
But in
Yep.
reality, yes. When I remember so vividly this one time, Yvonne,
Yeah.
where I was a child. I was like, let's say I was around like maybe 9 years old.
Yeah.
And I remember like if it was today, I was in the room and I was on my knees and I was praying. Whatever I was saying, I do not know. I don't recall what was it that I was praying.
Yeah.
Even if a child of 9 years old know how to pray, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
whatever I was saying, I was just there on my knees
Yeah.
praying to God. However, a child knows how to speak with God, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I felt the hands of the Lord on my head, resting on my head. I felt those hands laying on my head, and I froze, and I couldn't open my eyes. And then I opened it. Finally, I opened it, and I looked around me, and I thought that it was my mom that was there,
Wow.
resting her hands on me and praying for
Wow.
me. And when I looked around, there was nobody there.
Wow.
And so that was my first encounter with something spiritual.
Wow.
And from there on, I did continue having from time to time different encounters with God.
Yeah.
That He will reveal Himself to me. But I mean, part of my story, Yvonne, and I'm not going to dig a lot into that, but I survived a kidnap when I was small in Puerto Rico. I was in New York. I lived in New York by that time. I was
Wow.
actually like around 11,
Wow.
and in New York City.
Wow.
And so
Were you just visiting?
No, I lived in New York City.
Wow.
And so my mom, which, that's a whole different story, but she sent me to the store. I was around 10, 11, and the store was like 2 blocks away. And I remember that it was the summer because I remember the temperature, that it was hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
remember that it was darker.
Yeah.
And I remember that it was a summer. And so I went to the store because she wanted a bag of rice.
Yeah.
I remember all these little details.
Wow.
And so I go walking 2 blocks away to this place. I didn't even arrive there because there was this man walking behind me,
Wow.
and I could see his shadow, and I panicked. So I didn't know what to do.
Wow.
And as a survival
Yeah.
reaction,
Yeah.
instead of fleeing,
Yeah.
I froze.
Wow.
And because I saw his shadow and I saw that he had this bag on his hand,
Yeah.
and I said to myself, if I scream,
Yeah.
he's gonna kill me. That's the first thing that came to my mind. So as a
Wow. Wow.
survival mode,
You just froze.
I just froze and I went
Wow.
along
Wow.
with it.
Wow.
And so he took me to this park and he abused me. But then, but while I was there and it was happening, I was looking to my left, Yvonne, and I could see the highway. It was like a hill, and I could see the highway down there.
Wow.
And I said in my mind, I just started to pray to the Lord and tell God, God, help me, help me. And I was
Yes.
crying.
Yes.
And I was saying to myself, he's going to kill me. He's going to throw me there.
Wow. Wow.
And I was just frozen in
Wow.
fear.
Wow.
But I was praying to God. And what happened next was that same man that took me,
Yep.
God made it a way that same man took me back to that same place that he took me from.
Wow.
He walked me back to the same place.
Wow.
And he dropped me off there. And he asked me, do you know how to get back home? And I said, yes. And he left. And I was
That
panicking.
was only God.
Yeah, that was only God. And so that was another encounter that I had with God as a child.
Wow.
And so in that moment, I said to myself, my mom is going to beat me because my mother was very abusive.
Yeah.
So my mom is going to beat me if I don't go and get the rice. She told me to go buy a rice. This is me as a child thinking.
Wow.
If I go home
without that rice,
my mom is going to beat me.
With this Puerto Rican mother, yeah.
Yeah. And so
Wow.
that's what was going through my mind. I didn't
Yeah.
think, oh my God, I went through this trauma. My mom is afraid or probably worried and concerned about me. No, I was not thinking about that. I was thinking that I needed to go and buy the rice and go home because my mom was going to hit me.
Wow.
And so I did walk. After he dropped me off there, I continued my walk to the store.
Wow.
At this point, I didn't know this in that moment, but at this point, my mom had called the store asking if I arrived there, because at this time she already had called the cops and everything. Because I don't know how long I was gone.
Yeah.
I don't recall.
Wow.
But she had called the store asking for me. So when I arrived to the store, the people from the stores, they already knew. So they told me, I went to the store and I got mad at them because they started to ask me a question. I said, my mom wants me to buy a rice. Are you going to give me the rice? Yes or no? Because my mom wants me to buy a rice. And I was just upset because I wanted them to give me the rice so I could go home.
Get out of there. Yeah.
But at this point, what I didn't know is that they already knew that they were looking for me.
Yeah.
So she did sell me the bag of rice, and I guess that they followed me home.
Good.
They were keeping an eye on me.
Good.
I didn't know this, but they were following me home. And once I got home, my mom already had called the cops. Shortly after the cops arrived, and you know how all these things starts unfolding.
Oh yeah.
They took me to the hospital to do a checkup on me. They took me to the police station, and I had to go through all that. But anyway, I guess the Holy Spirit wanted me to share this a little bit because that was my first encounters of my relationship with God.
You know what I'm thinking? How amazing that you had that first encounter where he just put his hands on your head before that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like he was just covering you and letting you know that he was there and he was covering you before this horrific thing happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So those were my first encounters with God. Not really knowing what I was having, that experience that was having between me and God, not even understanding that.
Yeah.
But that was my first encounter. And so I knew that, didn't know how to explain it, but I did knew that God had something with me.
Yes. Wow. So then you're 10, 11 years old. And then when when was it that you revisited your relationship with the Lord?
Well, then after growing up, coming out of high school, I meet my future husband and marry in the island of Puerto Rico. At that point, even though that I was raised in church, but I didn't
Yeah.
have like that close relationship with
Yeah.
the Lord.
Yeah.
And so after I married, the first 2 years of the marriage, we were like, just clashing in our relationship, in our marriage. And at that point, we already had our two girls. I already had my two first girls, and I thought that we were going to get a divorce.
Yeah.
And so my husband told me, you know what, give me an opportunity. Let's go to church. And so we started to go to church.
Huh.
And those first 5 years of being in church, that was when I decided, okay, because I said to myself, I do not want to raise my children from dad to
Yeah.
dad.
Yeah.
And I did not want to be from man to man.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go through that.
Yeah.
Because I saw that in my mother's
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Her having multiple marriages
Yeah.
and divorces. And I didn't want that for me.
Mm-mm.
Because I knew that that was not healthy.
Mm-mm.
And so I said to myself, this has to work. If God is real, if having God in the center of my marriage is going to fix this, then I want to give God this opportunity. So then that's when I started to have developing again a different relationship with God, giving him permission to come inside my marriage and giving God that opportunity to work in our marriage. And so I began to dig into the word and not only attend church, but really put into practice
Yeah.
what I was hearing and
Yes.
listening in church. And so the 5 years were very crucial in our relationship, in our marriage, in our spiritual walk. And that's when God started to minister to us. God started to call my husband out for evangelism. And as a faithful wife, I was next to my husband, just supporting him,
Yeah.
not thinking that that this had nothing to do with me, because as a wife, I'm thinking I'm just supporting my husband. I'm just there to be with him. I'm not really thinking that, okay, that the responsibility is mine also. So say, okay, the calling is for my husband. That's the way that I was seeing it. So I'm just here supporting him. And so he began the evangelism, and I was there with him, and I saw him, working the ministry, and I was observing him, and just soaking in everything that God had him doing, and how
Yeah.
he was preaching, and how he was teaching, and how he carried himself,
Yeah.
and how he will minister to people, and how people will come to the Lord. And I'm here just seeing him in action, and and just soaking everything
Yeah.
in. I had all my kids little. I have 4 kids, so they were all little. So I'm over here in the back scenes, taking care of the kids and helping him in any way that I could in the ministry. Shortly after, God to call us out from the island of Puerto Rico, we went to Boston. We started to work there in the ministry in Boston. From Boston, we arrived to this little place called Fall River in Massachusetts, and he receives the calling from God to become a pastor.
Wow.
And I wasn't too thrilled about it. I wasn't too thrilled about it because I had seen my mother, how she was in church and how she was outside from
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
And because I was raised in church,
Yeah.
I was like, I've been in church all my life. This is the last thing I want to be doing because I know how it is,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, it was kind of upsetting, but I knew also that God was working
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
in me,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And so again, being in those shoes of a pastor's wife, I was learning something.
And I can't even imagine how overwhelming that change from going from almost divorcing
Yeah.
to now evangelism to now pastor's wife. How different that had to have been. Now tell me, in that, I know you didn't want to be a pastor's wife, but how were you seeing your marriage progressing at that point? Was it better?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It grew
Yeah.
stronger. You know, it was amazing because my husband at that point, before he came to the Lord, he almost died because of an overdose. He was the type of person that when he will drink until he will drop.
Yep.
And he started experimenting with drugs also,
Mhm.
cocaine,
Yep.
and I almost lost him at one point because he would disappear for 3 days, and when he came back, it was difficult. It was difficult, but at that point, that was the breaking point
Yeah.
because he knew that I wasn't going to put up with it anymore. That I didn't want to live that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So we were going to divorce, and so that's when he wanted to give God the opportunity to
Yeah.
save our marriage as
Yeah.
well. So when we began to pastor, we saw our marriage grow stronger each day, each day, each day, how we were developing and growing in the Lord
Amen.
spiritually as well.
Amen. That's awesome.
Hmm.
So how long were you pastoring there in Boston?
So in Boston, we were there from 1999 until 2007, and that was when then God started to speak to my husband about transitioning, moving back over here to Texas.
Okay. Okay. And then did you pastor here?
And then we started ministry here.
Okay.
And so we started ministering here, open up a campus here, Hispanic campus.
Okay.
We will do our services bilingual because I always liked, I felt it more drawn to whenever I had the opportunity to speak. I would like to do bilingual
Yeah.
services, so we always implemented that.
Yeah.
So, but our community in the church was mainly
Hispanic. Yeah.
Hispanics.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, so, okay. And then now walk me through. Okay. So you pastored here for a while and then walk me through what transpired and the changes that took place in your life a couple of years ago.
So, my son Jonathan, I have 4 kids, right? Eleni, Ashley, then Abisail, and then Jonathan, the baby of the house. Um, when he was 14 years old, he developed this infection, what they call like an immune disease disorder. And he started to develop these nodules in his lungs. And so I took him to Children's Hospital, and they started to try to dig and experiment and see what was wrong with him. And I'm over here trusting doctors, and
Yeah.
now I feel very apprehensive about doctors now. But
Yeah.
that's a whole different story. But so they ended up labeling him like he had lymphoma
Mm-hmm.
because he developed these nodules in his lungs that they will just multiply and spreading all over his lungs. So he was having trouble breathing. And long story short, he had to begin with chemotherapy at that point because he was breathing. There was one day that I had an appointment with him in Children's Hospital, and they did some x-rays on him. And they told me he's going to have to stay here today, and we're going to have to start chemotherapy right away because he's breathing like if he's breathing through a straw, like a hole
Oh,
of a
yeah.
straw, because
Yeah.
all the nodules were obstructing his
Oh,
breathing
yes.
area, his lungs,
Yes.
and everything. So I started to panic, and I didn't see any way out. I
Yeah.
wasn't happy
Yeah.
about him going through chemotherapy because honestly, I did not believe that he had cancer.
Yeah.
But they labeled him with cancer, that he had cancer. And so that was another season in our life where we saw God working again,
Yeah.
working
Yes.
with
Yes.
us. And so he went through 4 chemotherapies, and those 4 chemotherapies that he was there in Children's Hospital, he had 3 different experiences with God, and one of them
Wow.
he had an in-a-body experience
Wow.
going to heaven.
Wow.
So he goes to heaven, and this is the one from all 3. This is the one that really impacts me. And I like to share it every time I have the experience because he did see Jesus.
Yeah.
And he tells me, Mom, he told me, Mom, he was so beautiful.
Oh.
And his voice was amazing. His voice was strong and firm, but at the same time so sweet. And we will
Oh.
communicate, but we will communicate like that, like in our
You
mind.
know it. Yeah. Wow.
And you know, he said that, you know, he was having a very, very hard time that day, and he was crying. And my daughter were in the hospital that day with him, and she called me through the phone, and I started to talk with him over the phone. And I told him, Jonathan, you know what I have told you? Put your headsets on, listen to worship,
Yeah.
you know, and pray to God,
Yeah.
and you will start feeling better, and you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
So he put the headset on, Yvonne, and as soon as he put this headset on, he was listening to whatever he was listening. I don't know if it was a message or worship. I don't recall right now, but he said that shortly after that, he started to fall asleep, and the way that he describes it is like he felt like he was in an elevator and it was going up like multiple floors up.
Wow. Wow.
And as soon as he saw this light, it was like this bright light, and he's like in this elevator going multiple floors up.
Wow.
And then before he knows it, he's in this meadow,
Wow.
beautiful green meadow. And then he started to crack up. He started to laugh and giggle because he said, Mom, and the flowers could sing.
Oh.
And then he started to describe everything that he saw.
Wow.
And then he saw Jesus, and Jesus, you know, Jonathan was battling with his eyes. He had this huge inflammations in his eyes and his lungs, those nodules in his lungs. Well, in that vision or in that experience that he had going to heaven, Jesus showed him his skeleton, and from the skeleton, he saw these black balls, like gelatin balls, coming out exactly from the eyes and from the lungs.
Wow.
And so Jesus asked him these two questions. He asked him, are you sick? And Jonathan told him, apparently, that's what doctors say. And then Jesus asked him again, why? And then Jonathan looked at him. He was like, he didn't know what to say back.
Wow.
And then Jesus hugged him, smiled and hugged him, you know, and then that was when he showed him the skeleton.
Yeah.
And showed him those balls coming out. Well, after that, he never battled anymore because they couldn't find any more. Everything that he was battling with disappeared.
Praise God. Wow.
You know, and so for 7 years, he didn't have no issues whatsoever.
Wow.
But because of the chemotherapy, you know, I didn't know that back then, Yvonne, you know, and if I would have known that, there's a lot of things that you just don't know, that you're ignorant of.
I know.
But if I would have known that, you know, I always tell myself, if I would have known, maybe I would have been able to get some remedies to help him for his immune system. So his immune system would have been stronger.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he never had issues with cancer ever again.
Awesome.
You know, he was healed from that because God has showed him that he was healed.
Oh,
you know?
I love that.
And so, but then when COVID hit, well, you know how COVID was, you know, and everybody at home got sick, but it wasn't nothing crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we were all taking vitamin C, zinc, you know, a lot of orange juice.
Yeah.
You know, the only thing that I could tell you is that I lost my taste buds. I couldn't taste my food, and I couldn't smell. And I was sneezing a lot, but I didn't have no fever. I didn't have any other situations. Nobody at home did.
Yeah.
Except Jonathan.
Yeah.
Jonathan developed this fever.
Yeah.
That would not budge.
Wow.
It would not budge. And so I kept him home, and I was giving him Tylenol, and I was giving him home remedies, and I was taking care of him like a Puerto Rican mom will do.
Yeah.
You know, and I was, you know, giving him alcohol baths and, you know, just taking care of him the way that I knew best to take care of him with home remedies and things like that. But 2 weeks passed by, and he was still, you know, having these high fevers that he will break in shivers. And so then I had to make a call over the phone with his primary doctor. She prescribed him some medicine. When she prescribed him medicine, he took them. It just controlled what was happening just for a couple of days, and then he started to break out in fevers again. We ended up taking him to the hospital. He still overnight. He was not that bad at that moment. He was not that bad. So they sent him back home with other medications. It didn't help at all. He kept breaking out with fevers. This time around, his belly started to be tense because he started to, I didn't know that in the moment, but after he was hospitalized, they told me that he had like this pocket of water that was developing between his rib cage and his lungs. So he felt it like a pregnant woman, so he couldn't drink or eat. It was preventing him from being able to eat or drink anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the situation was growing worse.
Yeah.
Because here he is with a high fever and he can't eat or drink because he has this liquid.
And he can't breathe well because of that. It stops your breathing well. Yeah.
And if he will try to get up from bed and walk, he will feel pain because he will feel the pressure.
Yes. Yes.
And so at this point, I start panicking and we take him to the hospital. We had to take him to the hospital. I didn't want to, but I had to. And well, you know how the rumors that were going on, you know, if you go to the hospital, you're not going to come out of the hospital. I didn't want to take him to the hospital, but I had to. I didn't have no choice.
Yeah.
So I took him to the hospital. He stood there like for, I think it was like maybe 2 or 3 months.
Wow.
2 or 3 months. And he did come out because I was praying to God. And long story short, he recovered at some point. He did recover. He woke up because they put him under. You know, they did how do you call that?
Sedation.
They put
Trach.
yes,
Trach. Yeah.
yeah, intubation. So, and they put him to sleep so he won't be agitated or anything. So he was mainly all the time sleeping.
Yeah.
And he had that breathing tube in. And so he was getting really thin. He was losing a lot of body mass. And so they were doing everything that they were doing in the hospital that I really do not want to rehearse. But I was praying at home and I told the Lord, please intervene in this. And he gave 2 weeks and a half. He granted me and Jonathan 2 weeks and a half home where he was completely perfect.
Wow.
He didn't have no fever for those 2 weeks and a half.
Wow.
He was eating fine, drinking fine, sleeping fine, doing bowel movements were fine. You know, he was recovering really well. He was basically learning how to do everything.
Wow.
Walking
Yeah.
and everything. And he was starting to gain weight and everything. Even when I tell you that those 2 weeks and a half was the best 2 weeks and a half that I spent it with my son at home.
Yeah.
He was joyful. He was full of life.
Yeah.
He was normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And after 2 weeks and a half, he breaks out in fevers again.
Wow.
I didn't know this, but what was going on was that his liver was already affected. It was bruised.
Wow.
So me trying to get understanding, I start to question doctors, what's going on with him? What's going on with him? What's going on with him? And they tell me finally, his liver is bruised. And that's the reason why this is happening. This is what happened. This happened. There's things that they couldn't not do because if the fever doesn't stop, they couldn't do other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they couldn't control the fever. The fever would not budge.
Yeah.
And so one thing was provoking other things. And so finally, all his organs were getting affected.
Yeah.
And then that at one point, they transfer him to another hospital. And there he was like for 3 days when they gave us the news that they had called us before and asked for permission to do an MRI. And of course, well, yeah, whatever's going to work and make him feel better and get to the
Yeah.
bottom of this, yes, let's do the MRI. And so as soon as they take him to the MRI, after they put him in there to do the MRI, you know, all hell broke down for us. You know, doctors call us. We're in the back of the house, me and my husband, and they're asking us, you know, what do you want to do? We're doing CPR right now, but we're just going to try one time, and we're not gonna do it the second time. And so my husband started to, I hear him over the phone, tell him, please stay with him there, please stay with him there, please stay with him there. And so we're over here praying,
Yeah.
and you know, then they just gave us the news that his heart had stopped
Huh. And this was after the MRI?
right after the
Wow.
MRI.
Wow.
Right after the MRI. And so the worst nightmare that a mother could go through.
I can't imagine.
And then right after that, you know, God connected me with this man, spiritual connection that we had, or that we still have, that I still have from New Jersey. He sent me this video of this specialist of grief. His name is David Kessler. He's very renowned, has been in all networks, Oprah Winfrey, CNN, Fox News, everywhere, you know. He's the one that came up with the book. He was a student of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and he was the one that came up with the book of the 6 stages of grief. And so this spiritual friend that we have, pastor, minister, he sends us this video of this man, David Kessler, that I didn't know who he was until then. And when I sat down and heard this video, Yvonne, it was like if they threw me like a life raft.
Oh.
I felt it like hope.
Yes.
Because I could not understand at this point in my life. I was in this stage in my life doing ministry, you know, preaching the word of faith.
Yes.
You know, I'm quoting scriptures, memorizing scriptures, you know, I'm active, very active in the word of God, you know. And my son gets sick, and I'm believing that God is not going to let him go, and that he's going to recover from this.
Yeah.
Until the last moment, even when we went to identify my son's body, we still went in there at that point believing that we're going to lay our hands on him and
He's going to raise
and
up.
he's going to raise up.
Amen.
Until that moment, I was believing that.
Yep. Yep.
And so when that did not happen, my world crumbled down, because I started to question at that point
Yeah.
my faith.
Yeah.
I was questioning, okay, God, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
I thought that I crossed every T.
Yeah.
And that I dotted every I.
Yeah.
You know, how is possible? It can't be. This is a nightmare. How could this be possible if I know? And that's where God started to teach me a lot of things, you know, and revealed himself to me as a sovereign God. And he started to teach me that, you know, what is self-righteousness, you know? And he started to teach me what is being a sovereign God, or what a sovereign God is. And so at that point, you know, those next 2 years, I went through this process of me thinking that I knew who God was. And now I felt like I was back in square zero, that I did not know nothing.
Yes.
And that I needed to relearn
who he was.
Who God was, because I said something went wrong here.
Yeah.
I missed something.
Stop 1 second.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we're recording perfectly. Yep. As I don't want to miss any of it. Okay. So go ahead, continue.
And so after I connected with David Kessler, I said to myself, I need to understand what I'm going through because I don't understand what I'm going through.
Amen.
So it was the first time, even though that I have family members that had passed away, but it wasn't the same
Yeah.
until you go through something so
With
intimate and
your
so
son.
personal.
No, I can't imagine.
And so I got confused. I said, I don't understand what I'm going through. I need to understand this. I need
Yeah.
answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to me, it was like an answered prayer
Yeah.
that got connected me with David Kessler.
Yeah.
Because then I said to myself, okay, now I'm going to dig into this because I need to understand. I need to get some answers. So I ended up getting certified because that was an answer prayer. I said to myself, you know what? It will be great if I could certify myself, first of all, for my own benefit.
Yep. Yep.
And for my family, because
Oh,
we
yeah.
were all hurting.
Oh, gosh. I can't
We were
imagine.
hurting. I mean, my girls were hurting.
Yeah.
You cannot even imagine. I mean, this was like a thriller movie. When we walked into that hospital in Dallas, Yvonne, my daughter, my older daughter, she went into an asthma attack, a panic attack. She started to yell. They had to call cops and everything. And I had to explain to the cops, listen, my son is up there. He just passed away. My daughter, she's an asthma patient. Please, please, because the front desk lady, she called the cops on
Wow.
my daughter because
Wow.
she started to bang on the table because they didn't want to let us all in.
Oh, wow.
Remember, this was COVID. So they were going to
Wow.
let me in only with my husband, but they will
Oh.
not let my girls in.
Uh-uh.
And so my oldest daughter, she started to bang on top of the table and she started to curse and she was just out of control and she went into an asthma attack. And
Wow.
I said to myself, Lord, please intervene because I don't want my daughter not to go to jail or to
I
end
know.
up in a hospital.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So we're going through all this. And so, but going to the David Kessler, I certified myself. I digged deep into that. And that was the beginning of my healing
Yeah.
and understanding.
Yeah.
Still, at that point, even though that I went through that certification and that helped me, I still was wrestling with God.
Yeah.
I was still fighting, even though that if you would have asked me, are you fighting with God? I was going to tell you, no, how I'm going to fight with God. No, I don't think I'm fighting with God. But, maybe in my natural mind, I didn't think I was fighting with God, but I was because
Yeah.
I didn't want to accept the reality,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I can't even imagine just what a blow that had to have been. And I can relate with your daughter because I kept saying, I'm gonna tell you what, if something happened to one of my family right now, come hell or high water, I'm getting in there. I'm going to get in there.
Yeah.
And if my family member is ready to pass away, I'm getting in there. They can call the cops, whatever, so I can understand the emotion that your daughter was feeling right then.
Yeah, what they ended up doing is that, thank God for wisdom, I called the chaplain from the hospital, and the chaplain from the hospital, he made it a way that he took my children, my oldest son and my two daughters, and my grandkids, they set a separate room,
Good.
and they put an iPad,
Good.
and they were able to see him, that last time through an iPad.
They still didn't let them go in the room?
No, but they saw him through
Good.
but at
Okay.
least they saw them through
They
the
saw him.
iPad
Yeah.
while I was in the room
Good.
with my husband and Jonathan.
Yeah.
And I could tell you that even though that this was hell,
Yeah.
Yvonne, but till today, I tell you, God had placed something spiritual on top of me for me to
It
be
was
able.
when you were 9 years old.
Yes,
I see that now.
because to be able to walk into
Wow.
that room, Yvonne,
Yes.
to be able to honestly, humanly, for me to be able to walk into that room
Yeah.
and be on my feet
Yeah.
and not pass out with a heart attack or something and just